the entire building was full of angelic hosts. At the end of the building, there was a podium there, and there was a woman. She said to me, what we would like you to do is think about a few things that you might want to do. One of those would be to go to what's called the Universal College. I went to the class. To describe it, basically, it looks like a college that you would think of with theater seating, and the instructors on a stage, just like in a regular college, except all of the instructors, although they are not angelic hosts, they do have wings.
Okay, Adam Miller, he had 3 near-death experiences, and his first near-death experience was amazing. All of them were, but this one opened a new chapter in his life when he crossed over. He actually met Jesus, and he was taken to heaven, where he found a heavenly building in which he went to college, actually, for 2 weeks. So, hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm very good. Yeah. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me today.
You're a healer, you're a Buddhist, and you are also a light worker. So I would like to know how this all started.
I'm also a figure skater, which started when I was 2 years old. So that would have been about 1961, and because I'm 65. And just from the beginning, my mother took me to a figure skating rink, and wow, that was like a miracle. It was like amazing. I said, I wanted the skates. And so my mother got some skates, and I actually got on the rink, and in about maybe 20 minutes or so, I started skating, which just doesn't happen. Imagine a 2-year-old getting on and just beginning to go. I just kind of watched the other people, and I was like, oh, well, this is not all that hard. And I started taking lessons, and wow, it became a competitive figure skating career at 2. So I started doing competitions at about 2.5. And that is a really important factor, because I had also, at the same time, I had a very abusive father. And my father just beat the hell out of me, basically. I did probably 35 different times in the hospital. So it was a rough life, but the figure skating was, and still is, even, I think, to this day, a balance of, if you want to look at it like a good and evil sort of situation. And as I was figure skating and getting older, we'll take us up to when I was 15. So when I was 15 years old, I had a girlfriend who, she seemed kind of off, and we were at a party, and she just kind of went limp in my arms, and I'm like, what is going on? And it turned out that this young girl had taken an entire bottle of barbiturates, and she actually died in my arms when I was 15. That was my first encounter with, any kind of death sort of experience. I had no idea about it before that. And just kind of a little side note, I was raised as a Methodist. So I was a Christian Methodist boy. And because of figure skating, I didn't really have a lot of time for God back then. I was busy skating. And by that age, I was high up in the testing. I could do 7 triple jumps and a backflip, double axel, this kind of thing. And I was heading up the ladder of being able to be a high competitor, and I was very, happy with that. So some more years went by, and I was about 18, and a couple things happened. So one of those was my parents finally got divorced that year. And also I had a favorite grandfather who kind of raised me. He was from Arkansas. He was a farmer. I used to go back and see him every summer. And so the loss of my parents' marriage and the loss of my grandfather really was very, depressing. And I was in Los Angeles, and I was training for a very high position in figure skating. I was taking from one of the world Olympic coaches at that time. And I wasn't, really paying attention to my body. I was skating from 6 o'clock in the morning till about 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, and just absolutely grueling hours for an 18-year-old, child. And I started feeling very weak, and I just wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the body. Also, I want everybody to understand that people who figure skate or people who are dancers and so on, we're a bunch of hard asses pretty much. And we have a tendency to ignore the body a lot. And that's a point I want to make right now is people, you got to take care of your body, mind, spirit. You got to take care of it because otherwise it will fail. And so that's what happened. I wasn't paying attention, and I went to do a jump, and I was up in the air, and the world went black. So I woke up in the hospital, and the doctors and nurses were looking down on me, and they told me that I had double pneumonia, and my lungs were filled up with blood and pus to about this level here. And I had very little chance to survive it. So the temperature I had was really high. So my body temperature was about 107, and I was beginning to fade. So the doctors and nurses put me in a vat of ice. This is not a practice that doctors do now. This was back in 1977. And they put me in this ice, and the temperature regulated down to about 99 or so, and they felt safe to take me out. So they took me out and they put me in a bed. And I felt more or less okay for a bit. And then my temperature started to rise really rapidly, and it went up to 109, which is why I don't have any hair, because the temperature of that level just basically baked it off my head. So I didn't realize that was going to happen, but it did. So there you are. Anyway, I just started feeling this funny kind of, you could call it a separation. You could call it that. And then I'll make the sound like whoosh, okay, because there was a roaring. So this is a kind of roaring sort of sound, like I was going to a very, very, very far away, distant place. And I didn't see a tunnel or any of that. I know a lot of people see that. But for me, I just arrived there. And there was a man standing there. He was very casual. He had kind of this white sort of robe on, no shoes. He was standing with his arms crossed like he was concerned. And he said, how are you? Which is an interesting thing to say to somebody who's dead, basically, because I had absolutely no clue whatsoever that I had parted. Now, what I want to say right there is people ask me this question, so I'll answer it. How do you feel when you're dead? Well, the answer is that you're still you. And that's a very interesting thing. However, when I looked down at one of my hands, because this gentleman said, well, look at your hand. And when I looked at it, I could see through it. So it was very obvious at that point that I was no longer, in Kansas. You know what I mean? I mean, like stage left, okay, really fast. And he said, well, what's going on is I need to take you to this place where people can get you to understand better what's going on. So let's go there. And right when he said the word there, well, we were there. Now, this was magnificent. So there was a building, very much like a church, probably 500 or 600 feet high by maybe 1.5 miles wide. There were no windows. There was a ground, like that. There was a ground under it, like you would see on this planet. And but there was these interesting stairs that were in front. So he said, I want you to walk up these stairs and watch what the stairs do. And I said, do? And he said, yeah, watch what happens. So as I placed my foot on the first stair, I got a really big shock because the entire stair lit up in millions and millions of tiny little stars. It was absolutely spectacular. You know, when you tell this story, it's one thing, but when you experience holiness on the other end, it will absolutely change the way that you see everything about yourself. I'm telling you. So there were 72 stairs. I found out later that the 7 and 2 are sacred numbers in the universe, which took me about 20 years to learn that one little thing. And that's how complicated, you know, the mathematics in the universe can be. So I continued to walk up these stairs. And when I got to the top of the landing, the entire landing was kind of like plasma a bit. It was a living being. It's not like a building like we think of a building. It was alive. It was absolutely beautiful. More like liquid, I would say. As I stepped across it, it moved slightly. The gentleman said, okay, so I want you to enter the building, and there are people, I use that term loosely, who will, you know, explain what's going on. So I said, well, are you coming? And he said, no, I'm going to be with you later. There's reasons for that. So as I walked toward the door, it just sort of opened, you know, very slowly. There was 2 doors that opened very slowly. And I entered this fantastic building. And when I got inside, I got, well, my next shock. So the entire building was full of angelic hosts. And so I'll describe some of those. There were small little angels, about maybe 6 inches or so. And their wings were different colors. So I come to find out later that the colors of the wings are actually their level. All right. So kind of their education level or what their job is. All right. So each one of these have a job. There was also the seraphim angels, which a lot of people are very familiar with. And the seraphims are humanesque. They're maybe 6 feet tall. And they also have the colored wings of achievement. I believe they use the word achievement for their levels, their different levels of education. And then in the 4 corners of the building, there were the fantastic archangels. These were truly amazing, 400 or 500 feet tall, because you got to keep in mind this building is huge. And what I found out later about that is that they were actually guarding the 4 corners of the building. So that was their job. They actually did have a spear. They had armor, and they had a shield. Wings being colored. The material that the armor was made out of, that was colored. Blue, red, green, orange, etc. Depending on their job and depending on their education and depending on what they did. In that case, obviously, they were guarding, I take it, one of the most holy places in the entire universe. So at the end of the building, there is a podium there. And there was a woman who was on my far left. And then she motioned me over. And so as I got closer and closer to her, I realized she was absolutely, absolutely spectacularly beautiful. She had kind of a white robe. The interesting thing about her is that she had violet eyes. Now, that's something that really stands out, I think, as very different. And then when I finally got maybe 3 or 4 feet away from her, she also had this magnificent halo. So she had this beautiful halo. Every color of the rainbow was within it. And it almost looked like Saturn's rings, kind of. It was moving. So it actually had life within it. As she moved, it moved with her. And it was spectacular. A lot of people are asking me to give more detail, so that's why I'm going into more detail about this. So next to her, there was a guy sitting there, and his name is Saint Germain. And a lot of people know who that is. And for people that don't know who that is, he's also a saint. And many people work with him who have anything to do with alternative healthcare like I do. So next to him was Michael, which everybody knows who Archangel Michael is. There was Gabriel. There's Quan Yin there. There was the Great Buddha Law there, and so on. There were other ones, but I didn't get a very good gauge of the rest because there was about maybe 70 of these individuals there. And coming back to Mary, she said to me, okay, so what's going on here is let's start with the building. So the building is called the Hall or Place of Change. It's where all humans come when they're either entering or exiting a body. In your case, you have exited, but not entirely. So your cord is still attached to your body back on Earth, and you're more or less visiting us today. And now we, all of us here, are called the Holy Council. And what happens is when people are either entering or exiting a body, they come and they speak to us about why they're either entering the Earth sphere or exiting it. In your case today, what we would like you to do is think about a few things that you might want to do. One of those would be to just visit with us for a little while and then make your decisions about staying here or going back to the Earth. The next decision that you might possibly make would be to go to what's called the Universal College. Now, I'm a big person on education, and I was just thrilled to hear that there's actually a physical school that people can go to when they pass on. And I knew nothing about any of it. You know, I just want everybody to understand. I didn't know anything about any of this. I had no education about this at all. So this experience is the very thing that completely turned my life around from, you know, terrible depressions and things I had about being beaten and so on. So I just want everybody to know there's all of this is waiting for you. All of this is absolutely waiting for you there. We are not alone on any level whatsoever. And anytime anybody feels alone or depressed, you got to remember that these holy entities are always there, but you must address them and you must decide that you are more than just a physical person, that you are also a spirit, and that spirit is forever. So back to my story, I decided, well, yeah, I think I want to go to school. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that now I was dead for 4.5 minutes. So everything I'm telling you is in 4.5 minutes of Earth time. So I decided to go to school, and I addressed Mary and I said, yes, you know, I want to go to school. I'm really interested in doing that. So it wasn't like I walked out somewhere or that I went to somewhere. I was just talking to the Holy Council, and the next thing I knew, I was standing before the gates of the school. It just happens there. It's not necessary to walk at all. You're just there. So I was looking at this school, and there's an entire curriculum for different types of education that you might be interested in. So one of the things I was interested in was Okay, so there must be other type of life. There has to be. So the first class that I chose was the entirety of life in the universe. I decided to go to that class. So I went to the class to describe it. Basically, it looks like a college that you would think of with theater seating and the instructors on a stage, just like in a regular college, except there was about maybe 1 million souls there or so, probably 1 million plus, I'm guessing. And all of the instructors, although they are not angelic hosts, they do have wings, which is pretty darn interesting. And so, this particular instructor started out with having everybody understand that the earth is only just a very small part of life that exists in a very, very large universe. And so they went on to say that there's probably 11 to 1,200 different types of earths, you might say. Not only are they multidimensional, in other words, all going at the same time, which led me to a question of the instructor. I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then are we split? Do we have our separate selves? Are we just one self, or are we separate selves all going at the same time? And the answer was yes, that we actually multi-dimensionally live. It's not just this earth. There are other parts of ourselves that are living on separate earths, separate times, etc. So that was a great answer to that question, because I'd always wondered it since I was little. And not that I wasn't little at 18, still pretty little. And so the next question I wanted to ask was, how does, a person become more? Or how do you understand, if you're multidimensional, how do you begin to understand that? And how does it play into a lifespan of what we know as being just a singular life on the planet? And so what he explained was that there are attributes of every single one of these lifetimes going on as you're living that you actually use as food or information. So I found that very interesting, because I've had many times, and I'm sure everybody's had many times, of deja vu. Yes. Where you've been to a place, or a person or something. Well, it turns out that multidimensionally, that's actually happening. So you just happen to be tapping into a small part of that little bit of yourself that's actually somewhere else living. I realize this is confusing, but I hope I'm making it as clear as possible. I really enjoyed that class. And so I decided to go to the next class. Now, this is 2 weeks of classes, which we don't have time for. So I'll go to the next class, and the next class was about why do we choose what we choose on the earth? Okay, so what do I mean by that? Why do we have the parents we have? Why do we live in the country we live in? Why is our skin color whatever it is? Why is our culture the way it is? And so on and so forth. Well, it turns out that we actually write a book. Okay, so you actually write a physical book, and you start on the first page, and you're the individual, the instructor told me, that is in charge of every single aspect. Parents, country, language, skin color, whatever. How about this one? How many brothers and sisters you're going to have, what your connection is to them, and so on and so forth. So I was completely entranced by that, right? And understanding that. And I'll give a little bit more on that later, because there's another part to it. So then I went to the next class, right? So I went to the next class, and I said, okay, because this is kind of a small class. There's maybe 30 people there. Well, I use people loosely. Let's go with this. There was souls there. Okay. And so that instructor was very, very interesting. Is a more sort of down to earth sort of guy. And his name was Serapis Bei. Now, some people do know who that is, and that's an aspect of another type of angelic host, so Serapis Bei. And he was more of a general teacher, right? So you could pretty much just ask everything, anything, whatever things, doesn't matter things. And so I decided, well, everybody seems to be really curious about this whole past life business, right? So I was like, I think I've got a good question there. So I asked him about my past lives, right? So I started asking about the past life thing. And he says, okay, well, you sure you want to hear that one? And I said, yeah, I think so. Because, what people have to understand is some of your past lives are groovy, okay, right? And some of them are not so groovy, right? You make choices in a lifetime, which sometimes are with the universe and sometimes against it. So people have to keep in mind that the past lifetime thing is kind of like a mixed bag of nuts here, okay? So I'm going to just give you just a few of mine. One of those, which is kind of an interesting one, so we'll start far back and kind of move forward. One of those is I was in the Egyptian time, and I was one of the Egyptians who helped build the pyramids. Now, that doesn't mean I was a designer or a high up dude or none of that. Anybody can say they're a prince, right? Well, no, I was just kind of one of the guys that was help move the slabs, okay, to put the slabs in place. And so that was pretty good life. I had a wife and children and all that. And I actually lived to 109, which is really interesting for Egyptian times. Most people lived to 35 and they died, but not in my case. So that's one lifetime. Then I moved up to the more of the sort of gunfighter 1880s sort of level. And I am a person in history, which I'm not going to say who that is. I will say it was around the Tombstone, Arizona sort of area. And I was not very groovy. I was pretty much a killer and a gunfighter sort of guy, an alcoholic and womanizer or whatever. And so that was that lifetime. I died when I was 28. So, gunfighters have a really short lifetime. And then just past that just a little bit, I did another lifetime where it was about 1900 something. And I sank on the Titanic. So I was actually on the Titanic as one of the crew members. And I saved a lot of lives. And I actually looked this all up, and it turns out the guy was there. He was in the Titanic, and he did save a lot of people. And there's even he wrote a book about it. So I'll give you that much clue. And I'm very happy that I went through that. After that, yeah, people take this interesting U-turn stuff, and you got to kind of wonder, why is that? And the next lifetime, I was a pilot in World War II on the German side, and I became an ace at 16, and I continued to fly a Messerschmitt airplane throughout the war. Until 1945, in which I got shot down and died in the Channel. So that was that lifetime. And then obviously I was born in 1959. So that kind of leads us up to who I am and where I am now. So I would say out of all the classes that I did in the Universal College, I really appreciated that one because it gave me a much better sense of how I got here. And it's very important, I believe, for all of us as humans to understand where we came from and how we got to the body and the time or times in which we live in, right? So I think those things are very important to know that. That was the one of the last classes I attended. And so I went back to the place of change where the Holy Council was waiting for me. And sure enough, Mother Mary had that book I talked about. It's called the Book of Life. And she handed it to me. And she said, now, in order to go back to the rest of this lifetime, if you so choose, you must continue writing in this book the rest of what you would like to do. So I spent maybe 2 days doing so. And I wrote many, many, many things in there, which have actually happened since then. And I more or less have the idea, at least, about, where I'm going and so on, even right now. So the rest of this is really interesting. So it goes something like this. So I finished the book, and which I felt great. By the way, I had an actual graduation certificate from the Universal College. I actually had a physical graduation certificate for completing my courses for 2 weeks. And so I was very happy about that. And the council said, it's time to go back. The next thing I knew, I was in the bed in the hospital. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to know a little bit more about this because you mentioned several characters that are commonly known as the Ascended Masters. They are also known as the members of the Great White Brotherhood among the people who study metaphysics. So I'm talking about Saint Germain, talking about Jesus, I'm talking about Mary, the mother of Jesus. I'm talking about Serapis Bei, Sanat Kumara, Lady White. There are members. There are apparently 7 members, and each one represents a different color, the color of the rainbow. So, yes. Are you aware about this group, the Ascended Masters, the Great White Brotherhood?
So I see them differently. I mean, I understand your language. However, my language is totally different. And everybody that you just mentioned there, I do know. And they have been working with me from 1977 till current in my practice because I'm an alternative healthcare practitioner.
How do you call them then?
So I need to continue with the story.
Yeah, continue, please.
Because the story explains that. So I started to say, I was in the bed, right? So here we are, we're in the hospital. I'm done with a death experience and I'm in the bed, yes? And I'm laying there and I'm like, okay, is that real or is it Memorex? The shock value of that whole entire thing is just unbelievable for an 18-year-old child. Okay, because I went deep into the pool just immediately, and that's rough. The other thing I want to say here before I continue that is I want everybody to understand that the death experience, as glorious as it is and truly amazing as it is also horrifying. Okay. I was tremendously sick. I should not have lived. And when I came back down into that body, into that bed that day, I mean, it's like being hit by a Mack truck. So when you separate out, it's pretty calm. But when you go back into that body, it's just, you feel like a pancake. Okay. That hit is extremely hard. And I think that this next thing happened to kind of help me overcome that. So because I was traumatized and laying in the bed and shaking and feverish and throwing up blood and the whole thing, someone appeared at the foot of my bed. Okay. So, and it was the man I told you about in the beginning of the story. Right. And he was standing there in a beautiful sort of a green glow, I would say. But I recognized it, boom, right away. I'm like, oh, I know you. And he said, well, yeah, a lot of people do. And he said, I am Jesus the Christ. Okay. And if you remember, I'm the person that introduced you to the holy ones earlier, if you remember. And I said, yes, I do remember that. He said, the reason I'm here is I want to tell you that what we're going to do now is we're going to take the veil, right? So there's a actual physical veil that separates humans from holiness. Okay. And he said, I'm now going to take that away. So what I'm saying is between 1977 and right now, I don't have one. So I don't actually have a veil at all. So to answer your question earlier, because there's no veil, I don't have to call anybody. They're always there. I always see them. It's 24/7. And I've been that way since 1977. So back to my story a little bit. After that, a miracle happened. I mean, it was just incredible, right? So I spit all the pus and blood out in 2 weeks. And they said they were thinking I was going to be in the hospital 6 months because that level of pneumonia is just hideous. My lungs, by the way, I didn't get away scot-free, okay? I mean, I've got terrible scarring in both lungs. I've got kind of a scratchy voice. I'm sure you've noticed it. And so on and so forth. So, but it doesn't inhibit me from working or whatever at all. So after that, I was in such bad shape that my lung capacity did not allow me to figure skate on a high competitive level. So that was over. So I needed to make some choices about that whole skating career. And I decided that what I was going to do was go in the holiday on ice in Europe. I had always wanted to go. And because my parents, like I said, had gotten divorced and all that, I didn't want to be at home. So I chose to go to Europe. Okay. And I went over there, and for the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 months or something, not much really happened after I saw Jesus. I really didn't see much. So I started thinking, okay, well, maybe that was all fake, or maybe, I just dreamt it up, or maybe whatever. When you have something like that happen, you're not really sure whether it's real. You really aren't. And if you ask anybody with a death experience, they'll tell you the same thing. Yes, this happened, but I'm not really sure about it, and that's a common thing. However, in my case, I had a girlfriend. I was in the show 2 months. I had a girlfriend who broke her ankle. And so I started feeling this sort of light, beautiful feeling come over. It's almost like somebody is washing warm water over your head. And then color came after that, all kinds of different colors. I didn't see any entities or any of that. However, I just walked up to my girlfriend who had broken her ankle and just put my hands on her ankles. Now, I wasn't thinking to do so. I was just being a caring person. I wasn't really thinking about anything, except I kept seeing this color. And when I contacted her skin, it just began this amazing buzzing and sort of swirling sort of energy. And it scared me like really bad. And I let up off of her. And she's like, wow, what was that all about? I said, I really don't have any idea. And I hope you feel better. So I thought a lot about that for a while. But I didn't have any idea what would happen. So the next morning, she comes running into my room and says, I can walk on it. I said, what? And she goes, yeah, I can walk on my ankle. I can walk on my foot. I said, okay, well, I doubt if you can skate on it. She's like, no, I've already been to the rink this morning. I already skated on it. And that night she did the show. So that was the very first time I was like, okay. So something's going on, right? Something's going on. And then so she actually told another skater who had back injury, right? Because that's common in figure skating. What happened? So he kind of sheepishly came over and he said to me, yeah, I got this low back problem or whatever. Can you help me with it? I said, listen, I have no freaking idea. I don't even know what happened the first time, but sure, I'm, happy to do that. So I just put my hands on the back, barely touching. He's in the same thing, the color, except this time, which is, I think, the turning point in this whole thing, is I did actually see angelic hosts. So there was an angelic host kind of standing to my left, and they're called the blue ones. They have some sort of blue tint to them. I found out later that they're also called watcher angels, which is an interesting thing. Apparently they watch and guard and bind the universe in some sort of way, which I'm not positive about, but that is who was there. And he's like, okay, well, I didn't really feel anything. And I said, well, go out and try skating. Sure enough, he went skating and he didn't have anything. He had he went from 60 down to like 0 within an hour. So now it's starting to click, right? Now it's starting to make sense to me. Now I'm 19 years old when this all happened, 78, I think. And pretty soon I had like a line out the door of my room. So I had like this line of people out the door of my room. And I'm like, oh God, what did I get myself into? Because I have to tell you, really, sir, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. What is going on? I had no idea. Listen, the work that happens when you're dealing with holiness is not something that there's some kind of workbook for. There's no rules to it. Holiness operates in a way that's very, very mysterious. Anybody that thinks they know how the universe works is nuts. Okay? None of us know how it works. I still don't, and I'm not going to ever claim that. The other thing I want to say here before I go forward with this is that I do not believe that humans possess the ability to heal anybody. I don't believe that. I think only God does that. I think that only holiness does that. And I just have been lucky enough through my death experience and some other things that happened to be a witness. I think is the wording, yeah? To be a witness and stand next to that great holy energy and watch how it works. So I think it's important to say that here. So this whole thing continued in the skating show for 10 years. And I got kind of used to it. And I stopped being afraid and I stopped having stuff about it. And when people would come with something, I just said, sure, let's try it. That even ended up being the show owner who had cancer. Okay. So the show owner actually had some kind of colon cancer. And so we worked on that. I didn't really hear anything about him for many years after I got out of the show. And all of a sudden I got a letter one day and he said, yeah, I'm feeling a lot better. I think it was like 30% better, something like that. And then he went on to do whatever regular medical therapies that he needed to do. And I need to say something else here. I always encourage everybody to also do whatever mainstream medicine they feel they need in order to have healthcare. I've never told a single client that I've ever had, hey, you're going to come here and we're going to fix it. It doesn't work that way. They have to do a lot of work on their own in order to become well of whatever malady is wrong with them. So I feel like I need to say that. So after the skating show, I got out in 1990. And I felt, well, now what, right? So I decided to teach skating. So I started to teach skating. And I was doing pretty well at that. And I met this lady and I got married and so on. I'm just giving the short version. Because that leads us to the next death experience. So I'd been married for a while and I had a child and so on. And I was carrying a couch down some stairs and, the world went black again. Okay. So here's what happened there. The world went black. I was only in the middle of the stairs. So me and the couch went down the stairs. So I broke my nose right here. I dislocated my right shoulder, and I broke my ankle because the couch hit me full speed. I woke up in the hospital. This was in Walnut Creek, California. And the doctor said, you've got an appendix that's the size of a baseball. And what is happening is it's basically leaking. So what was it leaking? It was leaking poison blood, which is called peritonitis. And I started having blood poisoning throughout the entire system. And they said, we got to get that out of there because it's going to burst. And right as he was saying it's going to burst, guess what? Boom, it burst right there. And I went completely unconscious. Sure enough, guess where I woke up? Ta-da! Okay, so I woke up actually in the place of change on that one. I was actually just there. And the holy ones were sitting there, except this time they weren't very happy with me. They were all sitting there and they had their arms crossed. And they motioned me forward. My spirit, I want to say, in this one was very, very, very weak. I barely had the type of energy to even listen. They said, listen now, you're pretty close to real death on this one. And we want to tell you what happened to you. You are in a bad marriage and you're not listening to that. And you need to get out of it. And you need to change your life completely. And you need to go from figure skating to being a practitioner of the holy energy, because that's really, they were being honest and blunt with me and saying, if you don't go that direction, you're going to die right now. So obviously I listened to everything, every word. And they said, okay, it's time to go back. It's time to go back. And that third time to go back, boom, back in the bed. Back in the bed. This time there was nobody there. There was nobody looking at me and nothing. And what I found out later is that I was 9.5 hours on the table because the appendix had exploded about 30 minutes before that. And what it did is it sent little pieces of infection everywhere in the body. And they not only had to get it out where it was, but they also had to go around and microsurgery the other areas that had little pieces where they had to find it all. Can you imagine finding little fragments throughout an entire person's body, and you have to get every single piece out? I think there was 25 or 30,000 of them in an 8 or 9 hour period. Otherwise, the person dies. So I had an amazing doctor, amazing doctor who worked at lightning speed, right? So I came back, boom, in the bed. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I got to change my life. I have to do it. Took me about 3 months to get over that. That was a pretty rough one. I went to my mother's house in Arizona and I got over it. I called my wife and I said, I need to get a divorce. And this is not working. She was, to give people a little bit of sense of that for a second. This woman was so crazy, she would go to the grocery store, call me up in a panic and not know how to get home. So that pretty much sums that up. Then I put up with like 3 years of that crazy and I went, okay, that's it. And of course, what people need to understand is other people, although you may be involved with holiness yourself, can really mess you up and they can really put you off in a way to where your holiness is taken down to that right there. So I realized it, right? And I got out of it. And from in the 90s, that is when I really started going into holy work and really started paying attention to working on people with illness. So I started seeing about 17 or 18 people a day, and that was working well. And I was teaching figure skating. Now, to continue with the story, because it's the weird stuff is not quite over. So it might have been 1996 or 7 or something like that. I was working on people, right? So I was doing pretty well, and I was roommating with some people that were kind of a little bit weird. They were Yugoslavian, and they had some kind of belief systems that were a little bit shady, if you want to say. Now, I also want to give a background story about my parents. My parents owned a bunch of gift stores that were in Reno, Nevada. That's where I went to high school. And they were wealthy people. So I want to say that before I go to this next thing. I have never spoken publicly about what I'm going to tell you. I've never spoken about this ever to anybody publicly. So here it is. So these people were acting kind of funny. And somebody walked up behind me and hit me in the back of the head, and I was unconscious. I woke up in the desert in Palmdale, California, and I had a .45 pointed to my head. They said, we're going to kill you unless your parents give us whatever amount of money. I don't remember what it was. And they were also black cultists, so they were witches. At that time, I used to wear a hairpiece. They tore that off my head. They painted my entire head green. They made me walk backwards in some kind of weird ceremony thing. And then they tied me to a cactus, and they were going to leave me out there to die. My parents did send some money, so I'll say that part. And they left me in 118 degrees, tied to a cactus, and left to die. So, and the reason I'm telling this story finally is because I want to tell you a miracle that happened, right? So even in things like that, where it's truly traumatizing in a person's life, holiness will come to you. I promise all of you that. I promise you that. And here's what happened. So I was tied to this cactus, and my entire back was thorns, of course. And, 118 degrees, like I said. And all of a sudden, Archangel Michael came down in front of me and took one of his wings and actually put it on my chest. And the ropes that I was tied with miraculously came untied. So now I didn't know where I was. It was in the middle of the desert because they had left. And I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? What am I doing here? So I crawled on my hands and knees 2.5 miles to the road. And when I fell on the ground, a passerby stopped and saw what kind of shape I was in. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being dead, I was about a 7, probably. From my entire head and my face were 3rd-degree burns from the sun. Also, my hands, and they'd taken my shoes off. My feet were burned. And the firemen came and they rescued me. And they took me to the hospital in Palmdale. Of course, the police were obviously there. And they asked me all about the story, and they asked me who the people were, and they asked me what was going on. And of course, an investigation ensued after that. Now, it took me about a week to get out of the hospital. And when I got out, I'm going to put it this way. Karma is very interesting, right? And how it works. Yes? And so what I found out is that those particular people were in the middle of the wars that were going on, if you remember them, in the 90s in Yugoslavia, right? The Serbian wars and all that. And they had all gotten killed, every single one. So interesting, yeah? So after that, obviously I was careful who I roommated with, okay? After that, I had learned a massive lesson. And the massive lesson is this, that even a kidnap victim, or even a rape victim, or even a victim of incest, or even a victim of any type, and I've had thousands of those as clients, we can survive it. And you can come above it. And you can become a person who does become a holy individual, in which not only do you heal yourself, but you can help with the work that it takes to heal other people, even though you're a victim yourself. So even though I was beaten as a child and went through all these death experiences, went through all this other stuff, it didn't change my work at all. Not at all. Not at all. So after that, I just continued, right? And I continued to teach skating. And to bring us up to 14 years ago, I met Eve, right? Now, I don't know whether you noticed it, but we're Adam and Eve. Did that ring a bell? So we're actually Adam and Eve Miller. That's our real name. Somebody asked me, is it your stage name? No, that's our that's our real names. And that's obviously not a coincidence. I'm sure it isn't. So back to my story, we were working along there and we did really well. My office was in Lake Tahoe, California, in a place called Tahoe City. And I was seeing 14 to 17 people a day, 6 days a week. And so we were doing that for a long time. And then 5 years ago, I had another death experience, okay? And so this one was interesting and why it happened and what. So I'm working along, and sure enough, walking down the hallway, I'm 60 years old, and I hit the floor. So I woke up in the hospital again. I know, it just seems like a continuing story of this. Doctor said, well, you have a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot that's right next to your heart. And your oxygen is so oxygen levels should be about 95 or somewhere in there. And mine was 30, right? So I only had an oxygen level of 30. And he said, listen, you got to go into surgery right now, right this instant. So right as he was talking, blacked out anyway. So I didn't even need any kind of medication. I was already out. And got into the operating room. And I do remember it. Now, this is a little different. So when I was in the operating room, I did you know how people will float above where you can see yourself? So that happened this time. So this time I was looking down and watching them work on me. That's very interesting, by the way, when you see your own operation, pretty darn interesting. And all of a sudden I heard one of the nurses say to a doctor, we're losing him. And of course, out again. Now, this was a different experience, totally. So that time I went out, and the only thing I really saw was just millions of angelic hosts out there. And it was more like you would see in space, okay? So kind of dark with stars and so on. And there were just these angels watching me. And what was interesting is I kept kind of coming back and watching them work and then going out. And coming back and watching them work and then going out and seeing all the angelic hosts again. So I wasn't really sure what was going on with that one. And then I was back in the bed, okay? Well, it turned out later that I died 3 times. My heart actually stopped 3 times. So every time it stopped, I went back out again. And every time it stopped, I went back out again. Now, a couple things happened in the hospital. So here they are. So after that, I was in the hospital, and my oxygen was like 25. It was just terrible. They had me on oxygen and all that, right? IVs, and you can picture it. And sure enough, Jesus showed up, Saint Germain showed up, Quan Yin showed up, Buddha showed up. Now, these were at different times during the week period that I was there. I was there 7 days recuperating. And they would come and just give me small personal messages about my health, about what happened. But I found out actually from Saint Germain why I died and what happened. Because I was kind of wigged out. I was like, okay, well, the last time this happened, they were telling me I wasn't listening. So this time, my grandfather shows up also, okay, who I was very close to. And he says, listen, in the family, there is a genetic defect. So 4 of your uncles died of pulmonary embolism. So in this case, it was not because I overworked or didn't take care of myself or whatever. It was because of a genetic defect. And that really relaxed me. You know what I mean? It made me feel a lot better about lots of things. And I got well. I got well really, really quick. And pretty soon I was walking in about maybe 10 days or so around this little pond that has a little walkway in Reno. And I did pretty well. But I took a break, right? So I took a break from working with people, and I really haven't seen very many people up until about a month ago. It took me about 4 years to kind of go through my story, right, and try to figure it out. By the way, I don't want to forget that I'm in the middle of a book, and the book is called The Least Likely Healer, which is, now you know why it's called that. I'm kind of ornery, and I'm in the middle of that process, and these days I'm working again, and that's why I'm doing the interviews. So that's my story.
Well, that's a really amazing story. By the way, before asking you some more questions, I have written over 20 spiritual books, and I've also I recently gave in IANS a workshop for people interested in writing their NDE book.
Oh yeah.
If you need help, I can, we can have a talk, and maybe I can help you with that. The other things I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned Quan Yin, and she is the female aspect of Buddha. Okay.
Yeah.
So several of the people I've interviewed, or an important number of them, mention that in heaven there is no religion, there is only love. So
yes.
The fact that you see in these, as I mentioned before, the ascended masters, there's another member of the ascended master is Confucius. People also mention Lao Tse. So it seems that all the different religions are blended into one universal faith.
Yes.
So can you talk about that? How have you understood this?
I think there's a part of the story I left out.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah, so I think I better add it. So I think it was 2001 or 2002, somewhere in there. I was teaching skating, and I needed a break. I don't know. It just came to the point where I needed a break. You know what I mean? Because I was working ungodly hours, like 20 hours a day, teaching skating, if you can even imagine. I was starting at 3:45 in the morning and working till 11 at night. And I was like, okay, I got to change it. Well, in the area where I was teaching, there was a Buddhist temple that was on top of a mountain. So I went there, and I started talking to the monk there. And he said, well, I kind of think you're a good candidate for the temple. And would you like to come and live here? And of course, I'm like, what? What do you mean? And I explained I'm a skater, and I got all these people, and because I had like 300 skating students, if you can imagine that number, right? So my responsibility was huge. And I'm like, oh, how do I don't, yeah, okay. So I just found myself saying it to him. You know what I mean? It's like, when that energy is right for you, it. So I went to the rink, and I said, I'm going to be gone for 1 year. And of course, everybody there was like, you're going to do what? And so I said, yeah, I need a little retreat from my job. But I will be back in a year, and I will continue with my students. And I made them that promise. So, because promises are everything in my book. If you don't have your word, you don't have anything. So I went back to the temple. Yeah. And then there was a different guy there. And he said, Adam, I've been waiting for you. In other words, he knew I was coming. He knew my name, even though I did not tell the first guy by name or anything about me other than I needed a break. This guy knew all about me without me saying anything, right? Nothing. And because of my death experience, of course, then I had kind of a grip on that, which I think is why I knew I needed the break. So I entered the temple. I gave up all my earthly belongings for a year, my car, my money, my stuff, my clothes, everything. And I donated all of it, which was about 80 or 90 grand. And so back then that was a lot, as you know. Of course, 80 or 90 grand is like nothing now, but it was then. And he said, okay, so you're going to be the door guy. The door guy. And I'm like, what the hell is that? What is that? I think I even said, what the hell is that? And he goes, well, yeah, it can be hell in some ways. And I'm like, oh, great. That sounds lovely. And I had no idea what a door person at a monastery is. Well, here's what they are. They are the person that sits in the front lobby and talks to people and tests them out to see if they are qualified to come to the temple and either come on Sundays or whatever, or come into the temple and be part of it. And I had no idea what they were going to do to me. Okay. So I spent my first 3 months doing that job, and it sucked. It was awful. People would come in and they were either whacked out of their mind, or they were hippy dippy, or they were, some kind of materialistic person, or they were whatever they were. And I just had to say, no, you don't belong here. You got to go. And they're like, wow, we should have just hired you as security in the first place. And I'm like, no, thanks. I don't want that job. And however, right, in between the cracks, there were people that would come in that had a pure heart and were of a pure love inside and a pure motivation. And we would accept them, right? We would accept them. And then 4 of them that I can think of ended up staying in the monastery long after I was gone. So I felt great about my choices. Now, they used to have us do these long meditations. I'll tell you one of them and how that answers your question that you asked. It goes like this. I used to do a meditation because it was high up in the mountains. It was about 11,000 feet up there. And we used to do a meditation in the snow with no clothing for 9 hours. And you had to be really, really, really clear about things. Otherwise, you got frostbite. I mean, that's just a fact. So I think I did maybe 100 of those. And of the 100, I got frostbite 56 times. So, but after that, in places that I don't think I need to say. Okay. So it wasn't great because you're actually sitting on this little podium thing and it's snowing on you, right? So it's snowing. It's 20 degrees and snowing or windy or whatever. And you've got to keep your heart pure completely. And you got to keep your concentration pure. And you've got to center really well on the great Buddha law, right? So you've got to really center on that and be able to stay there. And by the time I was there about 6 months, I could do any meditation for as long as I wanted to. No frostbite, no physical problems whatsoever. As a matter of fact, enriched, and I feel like I just had a meal. So one of these meditations, I think, answers the questions you were asking, because Buddha came and he said to me, listen, enrichment of the soul is what matters and what takes us higher. It's what transcends the human into the holy. And with enough of this concentration, you then become that holy being and you take your body with you and you no longer experience the life and death syndrome. It's over. And when that happens, you also transcend any belief systems and they become one. And I think that's the answer to the question. And that's how we can achieve that. Now, I'm not telling people to go out and either sit in 100 degrees naked or to sit, anywhere naked or to do any of the exercises that we did at the monastery. You have to understand that at a monastery, everything is very, very regulated, okay? And there's a lot of people actually watching you the entire time to make sure you're not injured. So it's a very concentrated thing, and you have to be very highly trained, either in yoga or Buddhism, in order to be able to survive those types of exercises. So I'm not telling anybody to do any of those things, and it's definitely not recommended by yourself. Don't do them by yourself. You need to have other people present if you're going to do extreme Buddhist exercises of any type.
So yeah, precisely. They call them the ascended masters because they managed to transcend and take their body with them.
Yes. Yes.
Have they told you what their mission is or what your mission is, and what is their role helping humanity? I mean, can you tell me a little bit more about this group that some people call the Ascended Masters, all others call the Great White Brotherhood, and I still don't know how you call them, but can you tell me a little bit more about them?
So, in other words, what's my verbiage? So my verbiage is the holy ones. So I refer to all of them, regardless of who they are, as the holy ones because that's what they are. As far as my mission through working with them 24/7, because I don't have any veil. It's like being at a stoplight, okay, where there's no stoplight. It's just green all the time. All right.
So you mean that they're here with you listening to this interview?
Every bit of it.
Yeah. Who is here, for example? It would be an honor for me to know.
Yeah. So I have the holy Saint Germain. He knows you really well, and has done work with you before. Also, the Great Buddha knows you really well and has done a lot of work with you, especially in books. And also, interestingly enough, Serapis Bei is a little bit different with you, where you're concerned. It's more got to do with your wealth, your money, your income. Also, holiness looks at the core values of what we are. Okay, they don't look at the body at all. So when they address me, and Eve always finds what I'm going to say interesting. So when holiness comes through me, and I'll mention, don't let me forget there's another part of my work that I want to say, okay? An important part of my work. When the holy ones come in, sometimes they speak in mathematics and I have to translate it. Sometimes they speak in music and I have to translate it. Sometimes they speak in these languages that don't exist on the earth whatsoever, obviously. And I have to translate that. Now, that's only taken from 1977 till now, to try to even begin to figure out half of what they're saying. They speak to me and talk to me 24/7, awake, asleep. It doesn't matter what I'm doing or where I am. They're always there. There's always some kind of little message or something, that's going on. So whether it's an earthly message or whether it's a holy message or whether it's a universe message or whatever, there's some kind of thing. So I'm always finding myself writing something. And a lot of times I don't even know what I'm writing. It's called automatic writing. I'm sure you know about that. And where you just put pen to paper and just go, And as far as their work, on the bigger scale, they're actual work is to hold and bind the universe together so that it continues to evolve. That's their work. So when you look at the large scale of how that works, we begin to lose the concept easily. You know, it's easy to lose that concept because their job is so much bigger than messing around with a bunch of humans. You know, that we don't have that concept at all. So, and because there's a lot of other holy ones that you have not mentioned, my understanding is that there's about 374 some odd of them, but a lot of them don't deal with humans though. So a lot of them just deal with the creation of planets or the creation of other, because you know there's universes go forever. I'm sure you know there's a continuum; they never stop. I do want to write a couple of books about just what their messages are, you know, to where people can kind of understand that language better. Because what I do is I translate it down to just common language. So one of the things I've gotten really good at when people come and do experiences with us, because we offer a couple of things. One is where they do one-on-one things with me, whether that's in person or on the computer. The other one is we do like week-long experiences where they can come and do some things. One of the things that I do, I think I stood in front of maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people a few times, and I just will kind of step aside, and the holy ones will actually come and speak. And so they'll give messages. The people in the audience can ask questions and all that. So that's part of the work that I've been doing for forever. So I hope that answers some of those questions. I'm doing the best I can.
There's also one thing that you mentioned, which drew my attention, is that in other interviews, when you mentioned when you saw Jesus,
yeah,
he did not say, "I am Jesus Christ." He said, "I am he who you some call Jesus Christ." Or am I mistaken?
So I'll say it precisely.
Yes.
So when he's at the foot of the bed, I'm sorry if I didn't mention that. When he was at the foot of the bed in the first experience, he said, "I am also called Jesus the Christ," which is interesting, that he used the word also.
Yes, because one of my beliefs is that he existed way before. He was not born 2,000 years ago. He was created. he has been alive ever since the creation of mankind, or even before the creation of planet Earth. So my conclusion has always been his real name is not Jesus or Yeshua or whatever you want to call him. He has existed ever since the beginning of time. So he is the incarnation of that what we call God or the source. So
you know, I'll say an interesting piece about him, which I've never said to anybody.
Okay.
I think because you are so centered on him for whatever reason, you need to hear this. So they tell me many things that are, let's call them semi-private, about themselves, right? Most of them are unrepeatable that I can't tell anybody, but I can tell this one. And I also just asked a few minutes ago if I could. So I'll do this. So he has told me many, many times that he's had many, many incarnations in earthly times and in alien times and in other spaces that are not even known to us, in order to, and this is interesting about him, because you're asking me about all their jobs. He says, my actual job and mission is to bring order. What I bring is order and solidarity to the spirit. That's my job. And I have taken many, many forms throughout whatever time you want to call history in order to bring order. And I've been many different guises and many different faces and many different colors of many types of beings in order to bring stability to a universe that does have a tendency to have a lot of chaos. And furthermore, you must understand that the universe is in a perfect balance of light and dark. One cannot exist without the other. And because that is the case, and the mathematics works as such, then we have to understand that each side will do its best to rule the universe. That's what they do. So therefore, I have a constant job to keep the dark or the chaos out and keep the balance. So when you look at him like that, all of a sudden, it even takes the him out of it, really, into one of the greatest beings and instructors that exists in the universal spheres. I mean, he's fantastic. And I, he talks to me in modern language. I mean, a lot of people think of him as thee and thou and this and that and those people and this miracle and walk on water and whatever. No, that was a 35-year lifetime. And that was it. But does that make up? I mean, does that make you up? No. Does it make me up a lifetime? Of course not. And what he's gotten me to understand over and over and over and over again, especially because I've worked on a lot of terminal patients who have stage 4 cancer, they're dying of AIDS or some terrible disease that has no cure, doesn't matter what it is. And what he did, which is really interesting because he was present for a lot of those, for a lot of the terminal people. A lot of times people ask me who's present. I always say who's present and who's working. I always tell everybody. And because I owe them that. And what he tells them is interesting. What he tells them is you have a choice. What he tells them is you don't have to die. We can regenerate the cellular structure. And it is your free will and your choice in an unlimited universe to either expand right now and come up to the vibrational level that allows you to stay here, because that's really what it is. It's simple. Or you can pass on from the physical level and you'll still expand and you'll still come up to the same level anyway. And one of the things I learned in those experiences with these people is that relieves that person of thinking they either have to stay here, right? Or they have to die. And all of a sudden they realize, hey, I've got a choice which one to do, and about 50% stay and 50% don't, which is not a coincidence, I'm sure. You see what I'm saying? And, and that's why I like working with him, because he'll say things that are practical, easy to understand, and ever expanding and ever growing. He's one of my favorites.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, any final message to someone who is probably going through a deadly disease or recently suffered the death of a loved one or is simply afraid of death?
Right. The message obviously is, after this whole entire crazy story we've gone through, okay, is that if I can do it, right? If I can go through 3 death experiences with terrible disease or whatever, I can get kidnapped and left for dead, I can, whatever, that all of you out there absolutely can not only survive whatever the heck is going on with you, but you can expand and move away from that, and you can become so much more than you ever thought you would. And here's the other thing I want to say is, look at that disease or malady that's happening with you or to you, or if you're a victim of a violent person or other things that happen on the outside of you, you can actually use those things as an opportunity. You can use those things as an opportunity. Now, I have a message coming in from Holiness, and I want to tell everybody in the world the message, and this is what it is. The message is we are at a point in history now where we either we're going to have an earth that's either in pieces or is an earth that's at peace. That's the real, I think, message. And we must come together as humans. We must stop looking at the left, the right, the up, the down, the foreign or skin color or whatever crazy stuff people come up with. We have to give these things up. We have to. You cannot have peace on the earth if you keep trying to do things from the outside in. You keep trying to fill that hole all the time. You got to do it from the inside out and dig into the deepest part of your spirit and ask for help, and you will receive it.
How can people contact you if they want these one-on-one sessions, or if they want to, contact you for any other reason?
Am I allowed to say whatever those contacts are?
Promote you're allowed to promote your work, whatever you want. You're allowed, everything's allowed here.
Well, I'm cautious and careful. It's your space, and I want to do it justice.
Don't worry. This is your space.
I wanted to do it justice. Okay. So we have a website, and that is www.discoverwholeness.com. Also, there is actually a phone number. Okay. So the phone number is 775-722-2828. I'll just kind of mention this. We're actually in Tucson, Arizona. So we're actually down south, and we like being south. And boy, I tell you, it's been hot. We've had days of 115. All right. So it's been like 115 in Phoenix, which is 100 miles away. It was 122. Can you imagine that heat? So yeah, that's where I try to keep the work and the access to the work simple. You know what I mean? I don't like to make it complicated. I'm unafraid to talk to people. I don't have any stuff going on about that. And I really enjoy doing that. I think on the website also, it does offer a 10-minute free session, if they want, session experience, whatever you want to call it. I'm still trying to get used to my new language of this whole thing. And by the way, you are just a lovely man, and you're very gentle with me. And I really appreciate your mannerism. It's terrific. It makes it a lot less difficult to be able to get through, obviously, a difficult story.
Like I said before we started the interview, I'm really amazed with your story, and I really am impressed. When you say that you have 24/7 contact with what I call the Ascended Masters.
Sure.
You call the Holy Ones, the Holy Council.
Yes.
That's really amazing. Well, thanks again, Adam. I congratulate you. You speak clearly and wisely. So I hope I can have you back some other time to talk about other experiences and your work, healing, and all that. It was a pleasure, and I want to thank your wife, Eve. Adam and Eve. It was
Adam and Eve.
It was a pleasure to be to have met you, both of you.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.